All right, so welcome to episode 3 here at Naples Botanical Garden of Garden Walks with Jack. I'm really excited for today, in particular because we're going to start out with my very good friend Eric Fote. He's a good buddy of mine and he works here at Naples Botanical Garden, and his world is the natural preserve areas, and we're going to be diving into the upland and wetland areas, including a really cool birding tower, talking about all the incredible restoration work that he and his team have been doing. We're also going to dive into the behind the scenes of the gardens here and look at the propagation facilities and the nursery that support this incredible collection. I'm really excited about today, so let's dive in. All right, so we are at the trailhead here of the Florida Uplands Preserve. We're gonna boogie on down this trail here and link up with my good buddy Eric at the Ghost Orchid Boardwalk. All right, so on the way to the Uplands Preserve, we pass through what's known as the Ghost Orchid Boardwalk.
And so the Ghost Orchid Boardwalk is really special because we have a pretty rare orchid here in Southwest Florida called the Ghost Orchid, and we have it here on some pond apple trees. And it's actually through a remnant slough, which is a historic deep wetland. So let's go in and check it out. So here we are on the Ghost Orchid Boardwalk, and what we're looking at is a pond apple slough. So in the middle, late summer, this will be knee to thigh deep with water, and that creates that wonderful microclimate that orchids love. So they really need that humidity, that kind of warm blanket that'll keep them thriving throughout the dry season. And you know, just off the boardwalk, we can see them here. Now, you can see they're attached with zip ties right there. And they don't look like much now because they're a leafless orchid. And so they really shine later in July and August when they have their bloom, and they're beautiful, like ghost white bloom. And there's a lot of fascinating things that I could go into about the ghost orchid, but primarily I think is that they have a really interesting relationship with a fungus that grows on these pond apple trees. And it really helps them live, and they have a symbiotic relationship. So the swamp is a fascinating place, and the ghost orchid, the garden is very lucky to have them here. So something that's really interesting, Jack, is these ghost orchids came from National Panther Wildlife Refuge, which is a big preserve out east.
So they're not native here, they weren't here before?
So they probably would have been in any kind of wetland, but with habitat changes and, you know, poaching, a lot of those orchids were not as common
people
anymore.
were stealing them to sell them.
Yeah, and definitely in the nursery trade. So,
oh my gosh, okay.
So what we've done, actually, we've collaborated with that park and some other botanical gardens, and we've actually gotten permits with them to collect seed in these parks, and they grow the orchids in these glass jars, like ball jars, in sterile conditions. And when the orchids are ready, we reintroduce them to the wild.
Wow.
And so what you're seeing here in this video is actually that reintroduction. So we're hoping to get positive results here, and then those orchids can start to, you know, reproduce naturally out here.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So it looks like the preserve is changing now all of a sudden from the slough there where we had all of the pond apples into what we're going into now.
Yeah, so what's neat about Florida is only a few inches change can have drastic differences in what plants grow there. So, you know, we might be 6 inches different in elevation, and that delineates a wetland from an upland. So these pines, you know, I guess coming from up north, you might feel like that's nothing, but here in Florida,
6 inches is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And you can see that the pine trees are starting to come. So this is where the Florida Uplands Preserve really starts. So let's go for a walk.
So this upland area has definitely changed dramatically, in that it feels dry. It's like a, you know, pine forest sort of smell, and the ground cover is covered in, you know, in pine needles and everything like that. But it seems like these trails all through here just go on forever. So if somebody wanted to just come into the gardens and forget the orchids, forget all the Brazilian garden, forget all that beautiful color, if they just wanted to come back here and walk, because it's so quiet, so peaceful and serene. And we in fact just heard and saw a bald eagle flying overhead. How much, you know, how much land, or how much could they walk through here? What kind of distance do we have in trails?
So we have quite a bit just in the uplands itself. We have about a little more than a quarter mile, and there's more coming to that. And then around the lake, which we'll get to see a little later, there's probably about a mile of trail there. And, you know, in total area, we have about 90 acres.
90 acres
Of preserve.
I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah, so it's a great place to come out and, you know, walk or go birding, or just, you know, get out and into some quiet, like you said.
Yeah, it's amazing how quiet it is out here. It really feels like we're
and
hundreds of miles away from Naples, even though we're really right downtown. We're very close to downtown Naples.
Right downtown. And I think the other part that really captures me is that this is what Naples looked like, you know, before a lot of it was developed. So you're really getting to see the plants, the plant heritage and the wildlife heritage of Naples by coming here. It's really a gem that we have at the garden, and I think it's underutilized. I think a lot of our members come here and they don't get out here as much as they could, and I think videos like this could really help people explore this area.
Yeah, this is the best part of the garden. I mean, it's so quiet and just natural. It's real. It feels like the real deal. This is real Florida.
Yeah.
Right out here. And
we've done a lot of work to make that happen. So some of this, we were lucky, was in pretty pristine state. And we had to do some very minimal restoration. And by restoration, I mean removing sort of invasive exotic plants. But some of it took a lot more, like the South Wetlands, which we'll check out a little later. That was pretty heavily infested with Melaleuca trees. So, but we have a very diverse 90 acres, you know, 5 different habitats, and it's really got something for everyone as far as
and that's
getting
90
out.
acres just in the preserve.
Yeah, the garden as a whole is 170.
170 acres. What a treasure. All
right, so here we are in the Pine Upland Trail, and I'm going to show Jack around through this really cool habitat. It's sort of a mix between a pine flatwoods and a scrub ecosystem, which we'll kind of talk about the difference. But this is a site with some of our rarest plants, and it represents, you know, what was here kind of before a lot of this land was developed. So it's a real treat to be able to come in and see all the diversity we have here botanically.
Yeah, I mean, Brian was saying that this is, you know, for all of Collier County, really, one of the, you know, spaces that have really never ever been touched. And so one thing I noticed right away is the trail with this bright white beautiful sand, and, you know, to the naked eye it might look like you guys brought this in to make this really soft, beautiful trail, but this is what the soil usually is here.
Yeah, it's this pure white sugar sand, and, you know, when you look at it, it looks like a, you know, a Sandals beach resort or something. It's perfect white sand.
Yeah.
But you know, what we're walking on, and I think this is, when I give tours here, I always stress this point, is we're walking on an ancient sand dune.
Yeah.
And so as the sea level receded, these old sand dunes became these scrub habitats. And these types of plants, you'll notice these oak trees are only about 10 or 12 feet tall. So this is a really harsh environment, and only, you know, certain types of plants can grow out here. So we have a lot of endemic species which only occur in Southwest Florida, peninsular Florida. And it's just a really cool spot to see stuff if you're looking for rare wildflowers. You know, like this is a Sabbatia right here, this white flower. And I don't think you can find this flower anywhere else but in this habitat. And this is an endemic, I believe, flower, and just an example of the seasonality of the wildflowers here. And you really have to slow down and like stop and take a look, because not everything's jumping out in your face out here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, those are so dainty and precious, and these are really cute too. What's this little guy?
It's called Florida pennyroyal, And if you take a little sprig of it, crush it up and smell
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Isn't that
I
nice?
remember you telling me about this before.
And this is actually a really important wildflower for pollinators, because in the winter, when when not a lot of other things are blooming out here, these are. So we end up having a lot of wasps and bees and butterflies using that.
So one of the tools that's being used, more so on a regular basis now across all of South Florida and even out in the Everglades is prescribed burning to get back to a little bit more of a natural rhythm with how these ecosystems and stuff would kind of naturally go through their life cycle. And these pines are pretty tough, right? The fire can blaze right through here and it won't affect them.
Yeah, and not just the pines, but also the saw palmetto. All these things evolved with fire quite on a regular basis.
So lightning strikes and stuff, but we as humans have suppressed all that fire, so it's important to try to restore some of that natural cycle. So how would a saw palmetto survive a fire raging through here?
So, it looks like, after a fire, everything has been destroyed, but it's within a few weeks, the saw palmettos are already leafing back out. And the grasses and little herbs that are on the ground, those will have leaves back out as well. So it's really a renewal for this type of ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think as far as like land managers and people like myself that want to, keep these habitats healthy and diverse like they are, you can't beat prescribed fire as a tool for that.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We're really hoping in the future to build up our resources to be able to do a prescribed fire in the garden and use it as a learning tool.
Yeah, exactly. A teaching tool for sure. You'd be able to see everything that happens immediately after and a month after and 2 months after and really document it. And any time there's like a invasive or something in here that isn't adapted to that, it's going to get wiped right out.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be neat for school children to come through and on a field trip get to see a recently burned forest, and then we could send pictures back to the school like a few weeks later.
Or get the kids back out here a few weeks later.
I would love to do that.
I think at least with both of our boys, they learn more out in the woods than anywhere else. That's for sure.
As we were walking, I just wanted to point this out because this is Florida's largest air plant. It's called the giant air plant. And it's actually a rare treat because you get to see it with its spike on it, which is its inflorescence right here. So this plant sends its seeds out on the wind. So it tries to reach high up above the trees, and then like little dandelions, it releases its seed and they float and catch in the rough bark of the trees. And if you look just behind it, another native air plant called cardinal air plant is in full bloom there with, the red part and then the purple tips and the yellow anthers on the, just gorgeous. As you're here on the trails, if you want to catch a little shade, this cheeky hut is an excellent place to do it. And all these are thatched with the native Florida sable palm, or the cabbage palm people call it. But if you notice here on this post, you have a trail camera here. And we picked this spot because we noticed something interesting out here. And if you look at this little trail blaze marker here, I thought this was maybe just the post rotting or something, but we found out that it was actually bobcats using it as like a cat scratching post.
Oh, okay.
So we put the camera out here, and then about a month later we came to download the images and we saw some Florida panthers right here using the same trail we just walked on. So with the wetland and the uplands, with both the restoration we've done, we've seen the wildlife come back and use these areas. Even though we only have 90 acres, it's enough to support, a mom and 2 cubs using, hunting here at the garden at night. So I think I look at that as a success story.
Absolutely. That's so cool. So Eric and I have been enjoying the wetlands and all the sounds of the birds and everything in this natural preserve area. It's really pretty incredible out here. We're gonna head to the birding tower next, climb up there and look out over all of it, and hopefully we can catch some really unique species of birds and show them off to you as well. This is a really impressive place here at the birding tower of the Botanical Gardens.
Yeah, and so this is like our best spot to come look and check out birds from it's got a great vantage because it's raised up. And, you know, but it wasn't always this good of a view. 10 years ago, about when I started, a few years before that, they had started a massive restoration here. So this view shed that we had was pretty much a monoculture dominated by Melaleuca.
Oh, okay.
So that's a tree that was brought in the early 1900s in Florida. And so the garden has put a significant effort into restoring this habitat. And it's really great to see what has come back since we've done the restoration. Now we have alligators and otters and all sorts of bird species.
Yeah, there's birds everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And it's just become much more diverse. So it's really a success story as far as a restoration of a marsh goes. And so...
So what are all these towers of wood that are stacked throughout the wetland there?
So as part of the restoration, they cut down all the trees, but they didn't remove them all. So what they did is the sawyers cut down the trees and stacked them instead of removing them. To remove that much wood would have been another massive undertaking, and it would have also required machinery. So we didn't want to disturb the soil any more than we had to.
And that creates an awesome little habitat and everything for all kinds of critters to live in, and they'll just rot away and become a mound eventually. And
yeah, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Creates habitat and is a good talking point because you noticed it right off.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
and I've seen birds perching and stuff and using them anyway. But so you said that every year you do a Christmas bird count, and this year you set the record.
Yeah, we have a really dedicated group of volunteers and birders that come to the garden and use the birding tower. Every Tuesday they have some guided hikes out here, which is a really great thing to join if you're interested in getting into birding. Really experienced, birders coming out to help you. And in the Christmas bird count, don't quote me on the number, but I think it was 60 species in the botanical garden, and a lot of those were in these wetlands. So. And it's increased every year since we've opened, and I think a large part of that is to the restoration work we've done and how it's really settled in the wildlife that's come to use it.
Oh yeah.
If you look kind of out to the west there, I see a roseate spoonbill.
Oh yeah. So that slash pine forest, there's some trails that go through that too, right?
Yeah, and these aren't accessible currently because they have the wetland in between them, but who knows, maybe in future plans as the garden grows, we might be able to have some access out there to these. Luckily, we have the uplands that we've toured around, and that's easily accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really neat to be able to look out and see as much as we can from this elevated perch here.
Yeah, that's a good word for it, a perch. Yeah, I've seen all sorts of awesome things out here. And, it's not always crowded, so you can come out here and kind of have it to yourself sometimes.
Well, certainly today we do.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so here we are at the Orchid House. This is a propagation facility where they are taking orchids from the lab where they're grown in an incredibly sterile environment and literally grown from seed. And the seeds are so small, they're nearly microscopic like dust. And they grow them on in this very sterile environment in the lab. They're brought into here and grown out a little bit further, and they have thousands and thousands of orchids in this particular greenhouse, where then as they're about to bloom and show off their incredible flowers, they're brought into the orchid garden to be shown off to the public and viewers like yourself. So we're gonna check out this whole facility and a lot more of the behind the scenes here at the Naples Botanical Garden. Let's do it. But like I was saying, so once the plants come out of the propagation facility, then they're brought into here as tiny little sprigs of grass really is what they look like. And these are all different varieties of orchids. And then they put them into these little cell trays, and they're just packed in a little bit of wet moss to kind of keep them upright and going. And then as they start to develop a little bit of root and get a little bit more integrity to them, then they're transferred on and transferred on. And so as you get into the house here, you see some other orchids that are a little bit further on in some larger cell trays here. And as these plants get a little bit bigger, then they're transferred up into the air, and this is amazing. But we really have thousands and thousands of orchids, and they're all well labeled and organized. It's incredible. That bloom. Now normally orchids like this that are in full bloom and all their glory would be in the orchid garden, but because the gardens are not open right now, they're just letting them flower out and stuff in here. So usually this entire house is pretty much mostly green, but as we go through, there's hundreds and hundreds of these orchids that are just in full incredible bloom right now. It's quite a treat. Wow, look at this one. That is so cool. And that's like a painting. All right, hey guys, we are behind the scenes here at the Naples Botanical Gardens. I'm with Andrea Grace, who's the nursery manager, and she's gonna show us through this incredible backstock of plant material here. And is all this stuff just to feed the gardens, or is any of this stuff for sale?
Mostly all of it is to supply the garden, to enhance our collections.
Wow.
Flowering trees, fruiting trees, you know, really spectacular plants. We do have one project going on with the Community Foundation, and we're growing, it's their 35th anniversary this summer.
Okay.
And they're growing, we're growing 3,500 plant tree seedlings to distribute to the community.
Very cool.
They will distribute it to the community.
And those are all being grown right now as well?
Yes.
This is so awesome. So, like you said, most of this plant material is being grown out to move into the actual gardens themselves as soon as it's kind of up to speed or up to snuff. Those are pretty oxalis there. Wow.
Yeah, so, one particular plant.
Jeez.
We have this is one of our for the Community Foundation project. This is a Jamaican caper. This is actually harvested off of Airport Pulling Road. There's one of the oldest plants there that we've known for maybe 30 years or so.
Wow.
And one Sunday morning, I went out there and collected a bunch of seed and then brought it back to propagate, because some really passion of ours is to really know the provenance of these plants. So we've been doing a lot of collecting here in Naples, and this is kind of one example of a plant that we've collected locally.
And they look like they're doing well.
Yeah.
They're right here at home. And this looks like quite an impressive display of begonias here. Wow. They've got a lot of Rex kind of series, a lot of foliar begonias.
So this actually has a really good story as well. It's a begonia species U402, and this was collected 2003 or 2004 from our curator, and she bought it from a nursery over in the East Coast that has now gone out of business.
Wow.
She collected it. She gave it to our VP of horticulture, and he gave it to his mother, and then his mother gave it to another garden club friend, and then someone on our horticulture staff went and got cuttings from that woman's house.
That's
So,
awesome.
Kind of has a circle story.
Yeah. There's some cool cordylines here too. These are wild.
So we also, kind of this little area, we've been able to collect a bunch of palms from a nursery in Hawaii called Floribunda. So 2 Aprils ago, we received 4 very small boxes of seedlings, and they've now grown out to be kind of this whole
Wow.
space of palms. So there's maybe over 300 different types of palms just in this kind of.
So this guy right here then is, what did you say? It was just a teeny little seedling?
Probably about this big.
Wow. And this is big. I mean, this is ready to go.
Yep.
All of these. You've got a whole forest here. Wow, that's awesome.
So these these 5 benches in this area are all dedicated to our community foundation project. We have satin leaf, calicophilum, pigeon plum, some tababuyas, fiddlewoods, cassias.
That's,
cypress.
and so you'll grow them out bigger than this. Obviously, they'll get transferred up into like a gallon or so, like those palms that I just picked up. Yeah, those are really neat. I've noticed that a lot of the restoration work that they're doing out west after big fires and stuff like that, they're using pots and seedlings that are grown in these really tall cylinders to get a nice deep taproot kind of established in ideal conditions, you know, like this. And then when they get it into the ground, a little deeper to dig, but the plants seem to do a lot better.
Yeah, so definitely that's kind of the angle that we're going. And a little tip is that if you use a post hole digger to dig your hole, it's
Sure.
like perfect
Yeah.
to get that, like the depth, but not.
Or
you
a
don't
drill.
You can
Even.
use a drill too.
Yeah, we've been using augers and drills a lot more than we used to, which has been really nice. This is great. Wow.
We've been experimenting with a bunch of cool Solanaceae family plants. This one's kind of one of my newest favorites.
It's so funny because every gardener we've been walking around with through the botanical gardens says, this is one of my newest favorites, or one of my favorites this week. It's like,
yeah, so we bought
I love it.
bunch of seeds from, we get a lot of seeds from Tradewind Seeds. And so we're really experimenting. Maybe we have about 10 different species of solanum varieties. This one I think is Mericatum. Pepino is a common name.
Is that ready to go?
Not yet. So I think they said it's about, so this is the first time I've grown it. And really edibles is my specialty. Vegetable farming is my background. But they said about the size of a egg to a goose egg, chicken egg to a goose egg.
It's getting close to chicken egg there.
And it will get these more like purple striations on it. And you cut it in half, you scoop out the seeds, and then it's more like a melony type flavor.
Okay,
so I'm
cool.
excited to kind of test that out.
How big will that plant get?
So this needs to be potted up desperately. So I think that it's more of a small, compact bush.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's ready to go.
Not too far off.
No, ready to go.
That was
so
my project
cool.
for today.
Well, this nursery tour and propagation facility tour has been incredible. A huge thank you to Andrea and Nick. I could spend all day in here amongst all these plants. I love each and every one of them. However, we have one very special gift to give to the gardens from my team and I. So let's head over and do that. So this has been an incredible honor coming through Naples Botanical Garden with Brian and his amazing staff. I hope you've all enjoyed these 3 episodes. If you haven't caught episode 1 and 2, be sure to go back and check those out. Gardens like this really thrive and survive on the public and memberships. Many of them are nonprofit all over the country and all over the world. They need you to, become members, continue to become members and enjoy these beautiful spaces with your families, because they are truly a treasure. As you have seen here in Naples, this is one of my top 5 that I've ever been to. And every time I travel anywhere, I always stop at Botanical Gardens. So thank you again to Brian, and to show my incredible appreciation to the staff here, we are gifting some of our aquapots to Brian and his crew. I'm sure you guys can find somewhere for these.
Yeah, well, you just left our nurseries, and we have some fun things that we'd love to put on display in containers, and they'll probably be planted next time you come through the garden.
Great. Well, I can't wait to see them, because I know this white is going to look stunning in here. Thank you all again so much. This has been a treat. See you later.